Alright, party people. Party people in the place to be. It's Gabriel here, coming at you with another tier list. This time we're doing the Melting Remnant Common Drafts. Now, if there were a contender, I think, to fight Umbra for, like, first place, I need to lower this a little, don't I? I need to lower it a little bit. Let's be honest. Anyway, if there were a contender, blah blah blah. Basically, Remnant commons are pretty good, but I still think Umbras are better. The meltings come close though. Here, the problem is like, there's a certain element here of like, the tier lists across the clans aren't necessarily lining up. Like, how do I say this? Like I had Entumbra Assault. I'll just explain it when I get there. Let's get through it here. You're gonna see a lot of stuff in one single tier. You can maybe guess what it is, but Giraffe here. What do you think Giraffe is? Kind of a swingy card, right? Not always takeable, but pretty dang good when it is, and often it is. I'm gonna say A tier. Here's my thoughts on Giraffe. If you have Dregs secondary and you don't find Reform, it's pretty bad. Pretty almost untakeable. You can take it speculatively, but it can be pretty dead in that case. And it sucks to have a dead card in Melting Remnant, I feel. But obviously, 50% of the time you're going to have primitive molds, so it's going to work there probably. And another, on top of that, half the time, we're assuming just random here, right? Half the time when you get dregs, you're going to have Rector, and 66% of the time you're going to start with Dark Calling. Or at least you'll be able to choose it. I recommend you choose it. And in that case, you can take Draft quite fine as well. Maybe even better than Primitive Mold. So more often than not, it's pretty takeable. I would say it's borderline S tier in that case, but it's pretty decent as a unit. It suffers from not being a banner. I feel like you'd really like it to be a banner. But, it isn't. But one of the most usable, like, non-banner type units that you can build around. Like, I've had plenty of just no-banner unit type runs. You can do it with Corruptor. You can do it with Firelight. All of those are pretty good. But often, now that it has the DLC, you have that amazing infusion. It's got to be the best multi-strike infusion around. It's the only one that really just consistently is an upside versus a downside. The only other one would be the self-infuse on the alloy, but that's a pretty narrow one. And in a lot of cases, just starting with one burnout is such a benefit. And then you just get multi-strike on top of it. If it's Dark Calling, you put it down turn, like say you put it into a Paraffin Enforcer or a Bounty Stalker. Those are two pretty common units to put it in, or even like a Wickless Baron. You put it down turn 1 top, then you put the Dark Calling behind it. Maybe it's mid to late game and you even have some Harvest. You'll trigger a Harvest, you'll get around the Ember Drain, and then right in the next turn you get it back with the Dark Calling enhanced stats, and the burnout timer is increased. And then eventually you just hopefully have some burnout extension to throw on it. So really, really good. I don't know, though, that I can put it in the S tier, simply because as a unit, it can be a bit awkward, I think. And as I said, roughly a fourth, we'll say somewhere between a fourth and a third of the time, maybe we'll round it down to a fourth. Fourth of the time, it just doesn't make sense to add to your deck, I feel. So, and even looking at my pick rates, it's not quite on the level of everything else I'm even putting in A tier. Granted, a lot of that is that I'm infusing it a lot of the time, so it doesn't show in the data. But, I could be convinced that it's S tier, simply for the infusion. I wouldn't disagree there, but for the record, I'm putting it in an A, because there's enough times that it just doesn't work in my decks that I feel that it doesn't deserve the S tier rating. The next one we have is Dripfall. I debated B tier, but when I thought about it, I'm like, I don't know. I think Dripfall is just one of the most takeable cards in the game. if nothing else really fits, or you've already found what you need to find, like if you already found a molded, you already found a burnout extender, why not take a drip fall? I mean, that dazed is really good. You know, you can play it on any flying boss. It's really good against patient. It's really good against divinity. It's good in general just to have dazed around for the relentless rounds. You know, if you don't have stealth in particular, dripfall is going to be a godsend. And also, if you don't have good wave clear, you can manipulate floors around with dripfall, or even use it to overstack. It's just a really versatile card. There's really no downside to having dripfall. It's only upside. I think it's one of the more underrated cards in the game. Very, very takeable. I can't say enough good things about Dripfall. It's probably not S tier because the problem is it is at the common tier, and I would rather probably in a lot of cases lock in something more Melting Remnant-ish earlier than that. Like if I can get some Burnout extension, I can put together a Paraffin Enforcer line, which is my most common victory with Melting Remnant. Or alternatively, I can put together some Reform, or something, even like an Endless... Or even just getting the Stealth Tomb, I think, takes precedence over Dripfall. But otherwise, it's just super takeable, super impactful, mostly on most runs. I like it. Now, Entombed Explosive, I'm putting it in C tier, but here's a little caveat. This is where it gets a little bit tough to compare the tier lists across clans, because like you'll notice in the last tier list, I put Entumbra Assault at the C tier. And maybe this is just evidence that I should have put Entumbra Assault at the D tier, because like I do feel Entombed Explosive is C tier. Maybe it's like C plus tier, but I would say that it's significantly better than Entumbra Assault if I were comparing them card to card, right? Like if I have Entombed Explosive in my opener, I am not sad at all to see that. Whereas, like I said, I am actually pretty sad to see Entumbra Assault relatively. And I also think Entombed Explosive has a much higher chance of just being a part of my run than Entumbra Assault does. You know, if I can get double extinguish triggers, it will probably be good enough to just keep in the deck as a unit. Especially then it becomes a nice self-infused target. I think it's a nice self-infused target in general. It's not like a super enticing one, but you know, 100, if you don't get double extinguishes, you know, 50 damage twice, it's okay. It could be a good reform target. I don't know if I would put it on Endless, but like if you have reforms and not much better to do with them, it's a decent one to just have as your target for like primitive molds and stuff. You're getting like 100 damage here and there out of your basic card, essentially. It's pretty good. And then obviously the nut draw is to put it into Legion of Wax. Granted, on only roughly 20% of runs are you going to see Legion of Wax, assuming melting banners are present. You'll have to look at Wally's chart there to know for sure on each run. You can count the banners and kind of roughly get an estimate. But, you know, for the record, you don't see it necessarily that often, but you don't see it so rarely that it isn't worth considering that it is nice to be able to have that infusion. It's one of those infusions kind of like Queen's Imp into Transcendent that just is game winning. I think it's slightly more awkward than the Transcendent one, but it's up there. Once you've done it a few times, it's like riding a bike. Once you see it, it's like, okay, well, I won the run. Legion of Bombs just literally wins the run on its own. So that's Entombed Explosive, though. Like, the floor of it is it's just a unit that gets you through the early game. Like, it can put a lot of damage on those early tanks. It can chump block and put a lot of damage on the bosses. Not too bad, but also I think it's not too great a lot of the time. If you don't have like a reason to have it in your deck, it's often a high priority removal. In my opinion, it doesn't do a lot for a lot of decks. It also is similar to Dripfall, not very Melting Remnant-y, kinda. It depends on if you have Reform, I guess. And the next one we got here is Hallowed Drippings. I'm putting it in B tier. I think a lot of people might put it in A tier, and I can't really disagree there. I had floated it in A tier, settled on B tier. I think I just prefer the other ones. I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but I prefer the other Burnout extenders, I think, simply because they're replayable and they do something more than extending Burnout. Now, granted, Hallowed Drippings in pure burnout, I think this thing is wrong too. I'm pretty sure it's burnout 5. Is that a 5? It might be a 5. My eyes are pretty bad, but yeah, definitely Hollow Drippings applies more burnout at the time, but I don't find that to always be so relevant. Sometimes it might be. I mean, the fact that I can just replay Purifying Cleanse and Wicklash to me boosts them ahead. I guess I'm giving a little bit of spoilers there, but I do find that those are better than Hollow Drippings for my playstyle. But I can't really say much bad about Hollow Drippings. It's very low investment in the deck. It needs no upgrades. It would love a Permafrost. It would love a double stack in some cases, but it doesn't need it. And it's 0 cost. It consumes. It's a free incant. It's a free inspire sometimes. So not a bad card at all. It's probably like A- tier, I think. Who knows? Some people might have it at the S. I couldn't fault them for that. The next one we have is Molded. I think a lot of people might put this at S. I think I would too, pre-DLC. You could probably still argue it. I like it. I mean, obviously, it's not as good, I feel, if you already have primitive molds. I can usually make a primitive mold essentially represent a molded if I construct my deck correctly. But when you have dregs, especially, molded is a godsend. All that being said, I've said it before, I still stick to it. I just think Burnout Extension typically is better these days than Reform. Even with something like Dark Calling, often my plan is Burnout Extension. I simply have Dark Calling to allow something like a Giraffe into a Paraffin Enforcer, or a Giraffe into a Bounty Stalker, or even a self-infused Paraffin Enforcer, or something otherwise, just putting some burnout on these units. It's basically just to allow them to get played, and I can reform them if I need to until I find my Burnout Extension. I think that's, like, honestly the best use of Dark Calling. I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but I don't know. I think I generally prefer Burnout Extension these days. It's another reason, like, as good as like Hallowed Halls is, I have to end up skipping it because at that point I find it. I already have Paraffin Enforcers, or just like Stealth, for example, as well. Like, Stealth doesn't play that nicely with Reform. You want to keep your units in if they're getting Stealth stacked, right? So both Stealth and Rage, I think, really make me want to not Reform a lot of the time. But all that being said, a lot of times that's just not the case. A lot of times the case is that you want to Reform units, and in that case, you can't find much better than Molded. It's a 1 cost. It does what it does. You get to pick the unit. It's replayable. You can't really say anything bad about Molded. The only thing bad I can say is that I think it is maybe the second best Melting Remnant line. I think Burnout Extension is just the most consistent. Take that with a grain of salt, though. I'm not necessarily the best melting player, so... the next one we got here is Molten Encasement. For whatever reason, I never really used it pre-DLC. I can't imagine there was any good reason. It should have been just as good pre, if not post, but any guesses on what I'm going to rank Molten Encasement? 5 brownie points to you if you guessed S. Molten Encasement has to be one of the best cards in the game, in my opinion. Molten Encasement is to defense what Fledgling Imp is to offense. Now, offense is more important than defense, I would say, in the DLC world, so I would still say Fledgling Imp is better, but I'll tell you what, the two of these units together is a great infusion in either direction. I'd probably usually keep the Fledgling because there's more Imp synergy than there is Tomb synergy, but if you locked the Endless in on one of them before the other, obviously you just go that direction. An Endless Molten Encasement is just one of the most free wins in the game, I feel. Your defense is completely locked in at that point. Even if you don't find Endless, there's always Reform. There's also other ways to get Endless, like Remnant packed within Melting Remnant itself. Even the Votivary you can put into it. Or you'd probably want to put it into the Votivary, since Votivary is free. And then I think another nice thing is you can slap a Burnout 1 on it, and as long as you don't have Combustible Wax, you don't even have to have it get hit by an enemy each turn. and it just, you can keep doing it. It's also not a bad self-infuse, I feel. On Endless it might be overkill, but particularly with if Reform is what you're relying on, you're probably not going to be able to play it every turn or have it die every turn. And if you self-infuse, it really covers that downside. And you'll just always have enough stealth that you're never dying to anything. You're not dying to Relentless, you're not dying to Waves, you're not dying to Divinity, you're not dying to Seraph the Patient. All you got to figure out is offense at that point. Defense is 100% solved by a single card. How can that not be S tier? Definitely one of the best cards in the game is Molten Encasement. Also, as I said with, Fledgling Imp, you get it early, and it makes those early Merchant of Steel so much more valuable. Now you got, along with Multi-Strike, you have Endless as a God tier thing to put into it, and even Burnout +1. So you got so many hits at Merchant of Steels when you add a unit like Molten Encasement to your deck. Now the next one, I criminally underrated this for a while. I think everybody kind of does. Purifying Cleanse. This card is fucking good, man. Like, I'm putting it in the A tier a little after Molded, a little before Dripfall. You could probably shift it around either way. I think it just always makes sense to take this card if nothing else entices you. This is kind of a never skip for me, even if it doesn't end up really working for you late game. I think most of the time it will. It doesn't have to be a burnout extender. 15 health healed for 0 is actually pretty bustedly good. One of the rough combos for melting is Soul Guard primary and either of the melting secondaries, particularly Dregs, of course, but if you go Soul Guard, obviously, in my opinion, you always want to go Titan Channel. I think I got a pretty good grasp on Soul Guard, because Soul Guard is my second most winning champion in the game. I've only lost one game with Soul Guard since July. The only one to beat it is Shardtail, who's undefeated, but, just to toot my own horn there. But here's the thing about Soul Guard. I think you always want to go Titan Channel. It doesn't matter what your starting cards. It doesn't matter the combo. You go Titan Channel, but 1/3 of the time you don't get offered Titan Channel. In that case, I'm pretty adamant that Cold Channel is almost always the better call than Dire Channel. And here's the thing about Purifying Cleanse with the Cold Channel. It's actually really, really good. If you can get it, holdover, and really any spell chain is fine, but also +30 damage is fine. You're going to keep that sucker alive. And you may even just be able to benefit from the burnout in some way. You can incan a pretty decent amount of times, whether it's the spell chain or whether it's just some plus damage. It's even an okay Hellvent target at that point if Cold Channel is your main source of damage, which sometimes it can be. And man, I got to tell you, it's pretty good. But that's just a specific scenario. In a general sense, the best use of it, I would say, is either the Lady of the Reformed or just putting it on Paraffin Enforcers. Either of them, it's super good. It's a good holdover target. It doesn't have to be. It's one of those cards where it doesn't need an upgrade to shine. You can just have it. It could be okay permafrost target. Even outside those scenarios, I'm kind of naming the ceiling scenarios. It's just good as a burnout extension in general. I mean, you might just have a standard Dark Calling build where you're not really finding the nut draws like Paraffin Enforcer or whatnot, and just simply having whatever unit you ended up with being able to get healed for free and get 3 burnout for free is pretty damn good. That's going to set you up for Relentless in a lot of cases. You might even just play it on Rector himself, who knows. It's one of the best burnout extender cards in the game. Good Hellvent target. Oh, and it's good with Awoken too. If you can deal with the burnout, that's you can put that on Awoken Hollow just fine. I've done it plenty of times. I put it on Steel Singer. It's great. And then the final one we have here is Wicklash. What do you think this one is going? All right, I bet you probably thought I was going S, because every time I pause, I go S. Nope, it's A. It's A. But, hey, you might not have thought A. I don't know. I might not have thought until I look at my pick rate of it. and it's, you know, it's the second most pick rate I have. Wicklash. It's burnout extension wise, it's the least burnout extension, but at a certain point, who cares? It's scaling, it's flat scaling, targeted scaling, and it's literally the only one in the clan the only card in the clan that provides that technically for offense. You know, you get scaling through things like Reform, you get it through things like Fade's First Blade or Paraffin Enforcer, but those are all like tertiary. What's what I'm looking for? Like tertiary scaling things where they're situational. There's only one card where it says, you know, I choose you. You get 10 damage, and that's Wicklash. That makes it pretty valuable within the clan, right? And then it's versatile in that you're probably always going to want that 10 damage, but you're also often going to want that burnout extension. It solves a lot of issues. It becomes a really good spell chain target. It's a really good holdover target. And obviously just your standard Ember reductions are good on it. It's just a really, really solid card. It's very rarely going to be bad for you. The only time it would be bad is if you just completely abandoned your melting line. And even then, if you found holdover, you're probably fine still using it. It's literally a razor sharp edge worth of damage, which is, as we know, pretty good. Fun fact, I don't know if they'll ever fix this, but it also has, it's just worth mentioning. I don't have this affect my rating at all, but you can use Nexus Spike to have a hilarious option at removal. So you start with Wicklash here. Oh man, I should have researched this before because now I'm drawing a blank, but you can basically combine Wicklash and a card that deals damage to an enemy, or at least is otherwise targetable on a single enemy. I forget if you have to do it in a certain order. Go ahead and I'll do a follow-up just to make sure I'm getting this information right. But you basically can combo Wicklash with like a damage spell, something like a Vine Grasp or something, or even a Subsuming Blade. Subsuming Blade apparently. It should be Subsuming Blade. Subsuming Blade sounds stupid. Anyway, but the long story short here is you can literally apply Burnout 2 directly onto an enemy. Not a boss enemy, because Nexus Spike doesn't allow that, but you could do it on those mini bosses, right? You can do it on the mini bosses on the Divinity Wave, and if you hit it on the first or second floor, that motherfucker gonna burn out. Even if you hit it on the top floor, they'll only get one hit in on the pyre. Pretty neat way to get removal, but you know, it's whatever. It's kind of funny, but that's it. So as you can see, the spread here is similar to Umbra. To me, there's not as many just really S tier stuff. Everything to me with Melting Remnant falls more into the super solid category. Like to me, Wicklash, Molded, Purifying Cleanse, and Dripfall, those are all just really solid cards. Whereas Giraffe is definitely like S tier-ish. I maintain the A tier here just because I do feel a lot of times, enough times, it's just not fitting a deck for me to put it in the S tier. But the two really high roll things are definitely the Tomb and the Giraffe, which don't really match to me the high roll of Umbra commons. So I still give the edge to the Umbra commons. But if you told me Melting Commons were the best, I wouldn't disagree with you. They're close. This spread is just nice. I would also say even though there is one card in both C tiers and nothing in the D for the Umbra and the Melting, I would say the C tier here is not equal to the C tier of Umbra. This C tier is more in line with the B tier of Umbra, I would say. It's weird to say that because like the S tier is equal between them and the rest are equal. I don't know. Maybe I should have just said Untitled Assault's D tier, but it didn't feel like it's D tier to me. Who knows? Maybe Entombed Explosive is B tier. Maybe that's what it is. But then it doesn't feel like on the same level as Hallowed Drippings, which doesn't feel on the same level as Wicklash and Purifying Cleanse. I don't know. Maybe these are all S tier. Who knows? But they don't feel on the same level as like Space Prism and Immortal Trade and whatnot. So yeah, that's my long-winded justification for everything here. Let me know what you think. Going to close it out with Wormkin here, and then I tell you what, after I'm done doing all these, I might do an Arcadian and Sweetkin one. for the hell of it. I mean, why not? But I'll stick to the the game, the official seal of approval clans first, or the shiny shoe seal of approval approved clans. We'll go through them first, and then maybe get to those other ones later. And who knows? Maybe we got a special other type of tier list coming up after that. Only you can guess what that might be. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.